this is my review of Death Note. Okay, so this episode is the first episode set at the new facility, and in this episode they start to introduce who the third Kira is, and also some interesting things happen regarding the whole Kira task force. So it starts off with Aizawa trying to get into the facilities and trying to figure out how to get in. And watching the whole thing on his cameras, realizes that it's going to take some getting used to. But eventually Aizawa does manage to get into the building and meets up with Soichiro, who remarks that he has a band-aid on his head now, and Aizawa remarks that he got into an argument due to the task force related reasons, being that he's almost never home, and it's causing a rift in his relationship with his family. So yeah, that it's causing problems at home. So he's kind of at odds and chooses that the best course of action is most likely to stay at home. But in case they move to watch the cameras and watch a meeting between Light, L, and Misa. Misa and Light are going on a date with L watching. And Misa tries and fails to convince L to give her some private space. And L kind of just refuses, pointing out that they're kind of joined at the hip. And even then, they have security cameras, so regardless of where he is, he's going to be able to see them anyway. So it's not like him not being in the room is going to help. And then he also helps himself to her cake after asking her a little bit and prodding her a little bit to take it. Pointing out that he doesn't get fat apparently because I'm not entirely sure. I don't think this is true at all, but as L points out, the reason he's so skinny, despite us watching him consume nothing but sweets this entire time, is that he thinks real hard, and it causes him to lose weight. I find that a little bit ridiculous and a little bit pseudoscience-y, but okay, it works as an explanation, I guess. It does work since the human brain does consume the most calories of any part of the body, but I don't think it would be to the point where you would actually lose weight. I know for a fact that that's not true. I know for a fact that doesn't actually happen. But in case, Light picks up on the fact that L seems a little bit distant and out of it, and L tells him straight up that he's depressed. So L basically summarizes everything we've seen up to this point, and how he concluded that at some point in time, he did think that Light and Misa were the first and second Kira respectively. But then, while they were in confinement, suddenly that suspicion dropped, and they no longer act like Kira would. So from that he concludes that Kira is able to not only control another person's actions, but can also move from person to person, and the fact that this makes him particularly difficult to catch has left L a little bit depressed, because he realizes that that it's almost entirely impossible to catch Kira based on that. And also his depression isn't helped by the fact that his two suspects that he initially believed to be Kira aren't Kira anymore. So yeah, based on that, all of that is just accumulating to the fact that he's depressed and has kind of just given up on the case, which causes him to come to blows with Light, who isn't entirely happy about the fact that L has just given up, and the fight actually reinvigorates L's passion in the case, but because he's believes in the whole eye for an eye thing, he and Light continue to go to blows and continue to beat each other up. All while Misa watches in abject horror, might I add. She's not entirely sure what to do. She just stands there and takes it all in, and she's not entirely sure what she should do to help and stop the whole fighting between the two. Eventually, Matsura decides to defuse the situation by using the comms to announce that he got Misa a new gig. But all that really did was cause Light and L to ridicule him for being stupid, which he's not particularly happy of. I feel bad for Matsura. He gets a lot of shit. He really does. He tries the hardest out of everybody, but he gets a lot of shit because he's kind of useless. He tries hard to contribute, but nobody ever really acknowledges the fact that he's there. He's just kind of comic relief most of the time, and it starts to get to him in this episode. It starts to get to him by the end of this episode, and case in point, the next episode is named after him. So clearly it gets to him to the point where he decides that he's going to actually do something with his life rather than just sit by and twiddle his thumbs. So, but in any case, that little aside about Matsuro out of the way. Light and L start, after their brief fist fight in their room, go back to work, and Light makes an important discovery. Apparently, the Yotsuba group has only been killing people. Well, he discovers that's the Yotsuba group, but he discovers that it's only people that are in opposition to the Yotsuba group, and that the criminals dying is just a front. The Yotsuba group is presumably using Kira's powers to kill people. At least, I mean, we know that, but Light finally figures it out in this episode and deduces that that's indeed what's happening. And sure enough, Matsura and Aizawa, who are also in the room, are excited by this revelation, particularly Matsura. And when Soichiro and Mogi come in, Matsura announces the good news that Light has indeed revealed the motivations behind Kira. And Soichiro is a little bit dismissive of it, and then almost immediately after reveals why. Apparently, Kira at some point made a deal with all the different politicians and struck up a deal with them. If the task police force never gets involved in the case ever again, they will leave them all alone. If not, then some politicians are going to die, and that's going to be a problem. So, and to that front, Soichiro and Mogi have decided that they're going to quit the police force and join the task force full time, even though that it'll mean that they'll be unemployed and that they'll have to fire up their resumes again. So, and sure enough, Matsura is pretty adamant about following his chief to the ends of the earth, even if he's not his chief anymore, and also is adamant on wanting to catch Kira. So he decides to also join the task force full time, even though he's not going to be employed. Aizawa isn't so sure because, as I mentioned earlier, his role on the Kira task force has taken a huge toll on his marriage and his relationship with his family, and naturally he's conflicted. On the one hand, he wants to go out and catch Kira and do that, but on the other hand, he's also conflicted by the fact that his job is now basically compromised because they don't want to be involved anymore, and according to himself, that's not something that police are supposed to do. So, but on the third hand, if he does quit the task force, it means that he'll be able to spend more time with his family. So he's a bit conflicted, but also isn't entirely sure what to do. However, it's at that exact moment where Wataru decides to announce that El arranged a trust fund in case any of the task force members lost their jobs. So basically, El has all of their livelihoods secured for however long, and at least until the money runs out. But he's able to basically keep them from going bankrupt and keep them safe and keep them financially stable until they can find a new job and after they catch Kira. And this notably sets Aizawa off. Aizawa points out that that he finally realizes that he doesn't trust L as much as she should, and even outright hates him, pointing out that this whole thing was just a big game, that he feels that this whole thing was just a big game to L, and that L was just kind of testing his conviction again because L doesn't trust him. And while the rest of the task force members step in, pointing out that that's not the way L does things, L basically confirms what Aizawa just said, pointing out that while he has grown fond of Aizawa and how he likes to do things, he also points out that catching Kira is a pretty big deal. And also points out that he doesn't really need any of them anyway, since he'll have light at the very least, and he's been doing it by himself for a long time as well, so he doesn't really need anybody's help, and also doesn't really, as police members, he doesn't really need their help either. So, and sure enough, as a police force, they would actually be more beneficial to them, but since they're no longer police anymore, they're not really going to be helpful to him. And Aizawa, after hearing all of that, finally decides he's had enough and storms out of the room, and goes to sulk at the nearby park, which comes into factor later. So, but in case with Aizawa's out of the picture, but that still leaves Mogi, Soichiro, and Matsura working on the task force now that they've all quit their jobs and have started working for L full time rather than just working on the task force. So, yeah, they're no longer working for the police, and Soichiro even asked Matsura to stop calling him chief at one point, but Matsura doesn't listen, mainly because according to himself, Soichiro will always be his chief, and that's never going to change anytime soon. So, in any case, Mogi and Soichiro have made contributions. Mainly Mogi has done some interrogative work into all of the employees that work at Yotsuba Group, and Soichiro gives another bigger contribution, which is when that he noticed that the killings only happen on weekends. He notices at first that they were kind of random, almost as if somebody was still figuring out how to use the Death Note, which they are, but he realizes that it's almost as if Kira was getting used to his power, and then realized he can schedule people's deaths and started killing people between Friday night and Saturday mornings. So they started killing. So basically the third Kira, whoever he is, they haven't revealed him yet. Or her. Actually, it's men. It's all men, so it's likely a he. But even though they haven't revealed who Kira is yet, they can confirm that he does work at Yotsuba Group. He's learned how to kill people on the weekends, and that they have a list of all the employees that they need to investigate. And Matsura, hearing all of this and realizing he doesn't really contribute anything, immediately decides to ask L for work and try to figure out what exactly is going on, and also wants to try and basically prove his worth to L, who then immediately dismisses it by asking him to go get coffee, which Matsura isn't entirely happy with, and also in the process reveals that they actually have guests. So there's actually two guests that L has decided to bring in, and they're both criminals. So there's Wetty, who is basically a hacker, and she specializes in being able to circumvent security systems. Case in point, she snuck in the room without anybody noticing. And Eider, who is a con man who specializes in infiltration. And L points out that since they're both kind of hard to pin down criminals, that they'll be very useful to the Kira task force. And Light seems to be the only one who really gets the fact that they do need to work with criminals, since in order to catch a criminal, they need to think like a criminal, and as such, L has recruited criminals for that exact purpose. They're not really police members anymore, but the rest of the task force is still kind of a little concerned about the fact that they had to work with criminals to actually catch Kira. But in any case, yeah. As I said, Aizawa went to the park to sulk, but coincidentally, his family happened to be walking through the park as well. His little girl actually goes up and is excited to see her dad, and his wife asks him why he's in the park, and Aizawa basically responds that he's been given some time off, and he'll be able to spend every day with them, which is kind of a half lie, but it works. And also, in this moment, upon realizing that he can spend as much time as he wants with his family now, bursts into tears, either from complete joy or complete sadness. I'm not entirely sure which, but he's either over the moon about the fact that he can now spend every day with his family, or he's sad that he's basically lying. I'm not totally sure. This scene brings up a lot of questions in my brain, and I don't really have an answer to it. I'm gonna assume he's so happy he's crying. I'm gonna assume that's the case. But yeah, basically in the end, Aizawa winds up quitting and is replaced by two criminals who are going to actually prove pretty helpful to L in the investigation. But in any case, yeah, for the most part, this is about them deducing who the third Kira is, and Aizawa makes a difficult choice that he ultimately decides is the right one. So, yeah. Basically, Aizawa is no longer going to be a member of the Kira Task Force anymore, and now they actually have a lead on who the next Kira is and how to find him. So, yeah, overall, this episode doesn't really bring up any questions, but it's mostly about them finding out who the third Kira is. There's still the mystery of who the third Kira actually is, but they never actually bring it up in this episode. They just point out that they've started narrowing it down to one of the Yotsuba group, and that whoever it is working in favor with the Yotsuba group to actually, help the Yotsuba group get ahead, and while at the same time trying to avoid its suspicion as much as possible. But it's not working because L and the task force have started to narrow it down. So, yeah, that's my review of Death Note. What you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter in the description below. And also, check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks. I'm always saying thanks, so be sure to check those out in the description below as well. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!